The Honourable Minister of Acadian Affairs.
Is it supposed to come on? Okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I rise today to speak to Bill 112, the Emancipation Day Act. Premièrement, je vous remercie pour cette opportunité et pour le privilège d'être ici et pour partager quelques petits mots au sujet qui est très émouvant et rempli d'émotions. When I listened on second reading to the comments of my colleague, the Honourable Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs, I was inspired and moved to reflect upon the serious importance of this legislative project and the broader efforts towards representation, inclusion, and justice that it forms a part of. I thank all parties in this legislature for proposing that Nova Scotia recognize Emancipation Day. I believe that speaks to the shared importance we all see in this recognition. Mr. Speaker, let's be clear. People of African descent have had a distinct presence in Nova Scotia for more than 400 years, and slavery was a part of that history for more than 200. The harms of slavery and the ongoing legacy of systemic racism in this province must be acknowledged for progress towards a more equitable future to be made. As an elected member and a minister, I've put my full efforts into advancing equality and equity for those who have too often been left behind. I have worked on building communities and building a province that is more accepting and celebrating of diversity, where everyone is included, and where people's dreams for their lives are never hindered by who they are or where they come from. Passing this bill, recognizing Emancipation Day, is an important nod to what our African Nova Scotian brothers and sisters have lived through, how our history and progress as a province has been felt very differently for them than for other Nova Scotians. I attended virtually in February during the African Heritage Month the Lunch and Learn session on the African Nova Scotian migrations, presented by the Office of African Nova Scotian Affairs. I learned a great deal. Mr. Speaker, did you know that the first known Black person to arrive in Canada was Matthew da Costa, spelled Mathieu-da-Costa, an African navigator and interpreter of French and Mi'kmaq languages, who arrived as part of an expedition that founded Port Royal. What a legacy. Mr. Speaker, the minister had highlighted the lack of knowledge and education surrounding the reality of slavery in Canada and the lasting effects it has had on African Nova Scotians and all of us. For this is part of our collective story, and it's something we cannot ignore or forget. I'm a strong believer in the importance of remembering and honoring our history. I believe that all people, Canadians, Nova Scotians, all of us, should derive pride in our history. I served as the president of Canadian Lebanon Society a number of terms in the past, and with each term I became more and more proud of my heritage. It is what drives me today. Our history should inform how we walk through the world and bind us together as peoples and as communities. Honoring our history requires being honest about our history. It includes apologizing for past wrongs. It includes acknowledging and correcting inequities. It includes changing the way we talk and the way we think. It includes telling our children and grandchildren this was done, it was wrong, and we cannot forget it. This is where I think we have to be cognizant of what we can and must do. Moving forward on the path towards justice requires important symbolic recognitions, like the designation of Emancipation Day. It requires honest education and teaching about all of our history. And it requires the crucial material investments that help make communities whole. All of this is essential, and I'm proud that we are pursuing all of this in Nova Scotia. Recognizing Emancipation Day is crucial. It is, as the minister noted, a step forward. This province was built by enslaved people, and we must look upon that fact, reckon with it, and address day by day the lasting effects that it has had, and we have to do more. That's the type of work I'm particularly proud of when I look back at what we have done as government to work alongside African Nova Scotians and invest in their success. For their success is our collective success. I look back at doing right by the survivors of the Nova Scotia Home for Coloured Children. I think about the establishment of the new Institute for the Study of Canadian Slavery at NASCAD. How incredible it is that our province and country will soon be able to learn and benefit from scholars like the Institute's founding director, Dr. Charmaine Nelson, a Tier 1 Canada Research Chair in Transatlantic Black Diasporic Art and Community Engagement. This is the first institute in the nation, and it will allow scholars to work alongside cultural practitioners, responding to relatively unknown histories and contributing to larger narratives of Black culture, struggle, and resilience. I think of the announcement back in November of the province's partnership with NPower, which will allow youth from underrepresented communities to get real experience, a foothold in our information technology sector. I think of our recent investment in the African Nova Scotian Connector program to help attach young African Nova Scotians to the workforce as one part of the African Nova Scotia Road to Economic Prosperity Action Plan that was launched earlier this year. I think of the deliberate addition of diversity bonuses to the Graduate to Opportunity program to ensure employers give serious consideration to the countless talented young people from diverse backgrounds that we have in Nova Scotia. Since those bonuses were introduced, about 40% of Graduate to Opportunity graduates have self-identified as belonging to a designated group. Because this measure was successful, we have added a diversity bonus to Innovate to Opportunity into our 2 student employment programs, the Co-op Education Incentive and the Student Summer Skills Incentive. I think of the recent Back to Work Community Partnership announcement, which included funding for the East Preston Empowerment Academy to offer the pathways to building construction trades for racialized Nova Scotian women and men in post-COVID economic recovery program. Of course, I think of the investments in staffing added to support and speed up the Land Titles Initiative, something I was proud to have contributed to during my time as Attorney General and Minister of Justice. As a lawyer who practiced real estate law for more than 20 years and handled quieting of titles applications, I know the significance of these issues to the affected community members and the importance of owning your land, being able to mortgage it, and bequeathing it to your loved ones upon death. I think of the minister's new role leading the Office of Equity and Anti-Racism Initiative and all that can be accomplished through it. I also think of the province's ongoing work to recruit and retain more African Nova Scotians in Dalhousie's undergraduate medicine program, and to welcome and retain more underrepresented groups in our growing number of first-year nursing seats. This is vital because we know the value for patient outcomes of having a healthcare workforce that looks like the population it serves. The province's recent announcements of millions in funding to help expand and enhance computer science education at 4 Nova Scotia universities. Dalhousie's Dean of Computer Science has already acknowledged how this funding will help create more inclusive programs and bolster diversity within the field, allowing the school to form new connections and do more work to get more underrepresented people in the field. And it will be used to hire additional faculty from underrepresented groups. We'll develop the summer skills camps and recruitment programs to increase enrollment of women, Mi'kmaq, and Indigenous and African Nova Scotian students in computer science. Mr. Speaker, this is all to acknowledge that we have a responsibility to act on all fronts when it comes to addressing racism. We must recognize, we must educate, and we must invest. Spending matters, action matters, words matter, recognition and symbolic gesture matter. Think about the selection of Viola Desmond on the $10 bill. Think about the symbolism of the province repaying Miss Desmond's sister Wanda Robson for the court costs and fines associated with her 1946 court case. Mr. Speaker, I believe that our institutions and our society more broadly are waking up to the importance of changing how we think about race and how we talk about and act towards racism. Individuals, businesses, schools, governments, organizations, we are all reckoning with our role in a society where racism exists and impacts people of color. Mr. Speaker, I'm thinking about the importance of this bill. In thinking about it, I am brought back to an experience of last year that touched me greatly. In my role as chargée de mission de l'Assemblée de la Parlementaire de la Francophonie, and that is the Francophone Parliamentary Mission Leader representing the Americas, j'ai eu l'opportunité de visiter la Maison des Esclaves, un édifice historique situé sur l'île de Gorée à Dakar, Senegal. I had the opportunity to visit Dakar, Senegal, before the pandemic hit. While I was there, I visited the House of Slaves Museum and its door of no return. The museum is a memorial to the Atlantic slave trade on Gorée Island, 3 kilometers off the coast of Dakar. It is meant to memorialize the final exit point of the slaves from Africa and to remind us of the terrible human toll of the transatlantic slave trade. Standing there on the continent where so many were stolen from their lands and their homes, bearing witness, it was a moment of deep reflection. It was a difficult moment, but so many of the most vital ones are. Today, of course, things are different. Nova Scotia welcomes newcomers from all over Africa to bring their skills, talent, culture, and traditions to our shores, to build an enriching life alongside all of us. I can't begin to tell you how fortunate I've been in my role as an immigration minister to meet African newcomers, entrepreneurs, community leaders from across the province, to learn from them and to celebrate with them. I want to thank the settlement service providers and the community organizations whose work have made these possible. So in conclusion, Mr. Speaker, I just want to say that although I don't talk often, and I don't talk about this often, I've always noticed many similarities between African Nova Scotians, our Acadian and Francophone communities, our Indigenous brothers and sisters, and my own cultural community. There's a great joy and resilience and bond that we all share. I am going to quote a phrase that has resonated with me for a long time, and it is from Martin Luther King Jr. And I quote, "We may have all come on different ships, but we're in the same boat now." I'll tell you, Mr. Speaker, I understand this too well. But for Nova Scotians, for Canadians, and for the entire globe, this has been an unprecedented year for all of us. None of us in this house can count how many times over the past year we've heard the refrain, "We are all in this together." But it really is true. It's on all of us to push in the direction of unity, of justice, of celebrating diversity, of fostering inclusion, of learning to do better, and of righting the wrongs of yesterday and today. I believe recognizing Emancipation Day in Nova Scotia will be a part of that push. And I'm very proud of what we have accomplished together, and I am proud and privileged to rise here in this historic chamber at this historic time to speak in support of this bill. Merci beaucoup.
Trying to recognize the Honourable Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs. It will be to close third reading of Bill number 112, the Emancipation Day Act. The Honourable Minister of African Nova Scotian Affairs.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm moved. Not only by the words of my colleague, but also the colleagues from across the floor. As the minister responsible for the Office of African Nova Scotian Affairs and the Office of Equity and Anti-Racism Initiatives, I am looking forward just to say a few words here. As I've said previously, Mr. Speaker, this legislation is something that many people of African Nova Scotian communities from across the province have encouraged. And I thank them all for standing up and sending their voices to have us move in this direction. I also want to acknowledge, again, both party members from across the floor who have done a great job in bringing those voices from their communities to the floor to help us recognize this important day. For years, Mr. Speaker, many people of African descent in the Caribbean countries and other parts of the world have celebrated August 1st as Emancipation Day. The date marks the anniversary, as was mentioned, that the British Parliament abolished slavery across the British Empire. I'd like to speak to the importance of this bill. Many Nova Scotians, in fact, many African Nova Scotians, are ignorant to this history and many other facts and events linking African Nova Scotians, and Canadians. It has only been less than 30 years, I would say, that Nova Scotia and most African Nova Scotians would have learned about Matthew DaCosta, Dr. Carrie Bess, Viola Desmond, the No. 2 Construction Battalion, and I can go on. It took a major media event to focus on the stories of the Black Loyalists. Many people are not aware of the history in another part of Canada that has a history almost as long as Nova Scotia, and that is Buxton and Chatham in Ontario. We have to remember, during that period of time, and I need you to really understand this, Mr. Speaker, during that period of time, 1600 to 1800s, there really weren't any borders. So we had lots of Americans traveling with their property to Canada, back and forth, back and forth. We have stories of what was told as Uncle Tom's Cabin, which came out of the story of Josiah Henson in Ontario, in Dresden, Ontario. The reality is, we still have people in this province who do not want to be serviced by someone who looks like me or the other. It's because, again, when you look at our history in any textbooks, it may be a paragraph, it may be one page, if we get that. So if we're not teaching people that true story, then how are we supposed to stand here and look at each other and say we respect and we honor you if out the other side of our mouth we're putting things in place to prevent the equity or the advancement of those folks? My colleague has listed off a host of things that have happened since we've come into power in 2013. I don't want to go on much longer because it's getting late and I know we're all tired, but for the leader of the opposition, I've got a soundbite for you. Tell history from the perspective of the lion and not the hunter. I also would like everyone in this house and anyone who's listening, if you truly want to get a snapshot, an insight into the effects of the transatlantic slave trade, how that has impacted North America, and how that impact still is felt today, to truly understand how anti-Black racism has been set forth, first of all, in an Academy Award-winning movie, Birth of a Nation, that the President of the United States stood up and applauded. I'm going to ask everyone, please take a moment and look at the documentary, The 13th, which speaks to the 13th Amendment in the United States. And I have to go there because what happens there trickles here. It could be a flow, actually. So please, if you have some time and if you truly want to understand how slavery hasn't really been abolished and how the effects of all of that 400 years ago still affect us today, and if you truly want to understand, look at this documentary, The 13th. And with that, Mr. Speaker, I ask that Bill 112, the Bill 112, the Emancipation Day Act, do pass. Thank you. Thank you all.
The motion is to close third reading of Bill number 112, the Emancipation Day Act. Would all those in favor of the motion please signify by aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried.
Bill 112, an act to recognize Emancipation Day.
Ordered that the bill do pass and the title be as read by the clerk. Ordered that the bill be engrossed. The House will now recess for its 15-minute COVID break and will resume proceedings at 9:20.
Order, please. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would you please call address and reply?
Address and reply. I recognize the Honourable Leader of the New Democratic Party.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I know that you're aware, and probably all members are aware, because she said as much in her excellent speech on housing going into the budget estimates late last week. We're all aware that the member for Halifax Needham has taken the decision to stand for the nomination of the New Democratic Party in the federal riding of Halifax. And because there's so much election probability in the air, we know that means that this could well be her last session in her present capacities, and this could be her concluding possibly moment in this chamber. So I just want to take a few seconds and recognize and appreciate the contributions that the member for Halifax Needham has made in this room as a participant in the legislative process. From the time she came to this work 5 years ago following the by-election in Halifax Needham, she has always offered a thought-filled and articulate voice on the subjects that she believes in, which are a considerable range. It's been a thoughtful and clear, articulate voice, for sure, as our party's spokesperson on housing, on the subject of housing and on many dimensions of that subject. Affordable housing as a whole, the struggle to eliminate homelessness as a whole, the struggle in which we have engaged for rent control. And she has been an articulate and thought-filled advocate. At the same time, over these 4 years, I want to draw attention to, for the whole universe of things local. That is local communities and local governance and local food. And she has been, over these 5 years, she has made a real contribution to the legislative life of Province House in her forceful and clear voice for sustainability from a range of angles. Sustainability, certainly in this recent period, on forestry, throughout the 5 years, on the environment in general, and throughout this period in a host of different ways, strong and forceful and thought-filled and clear on the struggle to address the crisis of climate change. I want to recognize and appreciate those things. I also want to recognize and appreciate the strength of her presence in the North End community she serves. From the first time that she and I campaigned together in Halifax Needham, I was fair blown away by the depth of the connections that she had from all sorts of different angles with people in parts of the constituency that we would meet. And this has been reflected, this was reflected in the results of the 2017 election, when the member for Halifax Needham had the largest of the majorities of anyone from the New Democratic Party's caucus. So I just want to say that it is a natural thing that she should wish to take her concerns and her abilities and bring them to the federal stage, seeking to join the team under Jagmeet Singh. And I simply want to conclude, Madam Speaker, by saying that we in the caucus of the New Democratic Party are excited by the fact that someone of her convictions and her capacities is prepared to take on the mission of reestablishing the social democratic voice in the federal politics of Nova Scotia. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
I recognize the honourable member for Cape Breton Richmond.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And it's a late night here in the legislature. I apologize in advance if maybe I stutter a little bit or if my mind wanders. I'm sure we're all a little bit tired. And I don't know about any of you, but I'd also wouldn't mind to have a nice big juicy steak right now to kind of to get a little bit of protein in me. So I want this opportunity. I thank my colleagues for giving me this opportunity to be able to rise and say a few things in reply to speech from the throne. I know that the Lieutenant Governor is waiting to be able to come in and finish proceedings here this evening. But I feel as though if I don't take this opportunity, which may very well be my last opportunity, to speak in this House and get things on, off my chest, getting it on public record, I guess, as well, and making certain that I leave here this evening feeling that I tried my best to get the message that is within me, the best way that I can describe it, the message that's within me, and that is a part of me. And I feel as though I really struggle to be able to get that message across sometimes to other members of this House. We just went through listening to the minister speak from the perspective of obviously being an African Nova Scotian man here and, sitting in the legislature. We've just passed the Emancipation Act. And it's a wonderful and very historical moment to be able to be part of that. And listening to the Minister as well of Immigration and Acadian Affairs, and it was really difficult for me to sit here and I would, biting the inside of my cheek, trying not to get emotional, because much of what she said spoke to me. It spoke to me greatly. And the reason that is because I truly do believe, and I think from the minister's comments, is that we are all more alike than we are different. We are all more alike than we are different. There are some of us, however, that have histories, and in this province, as far as I know my personal history. Others in this House may be fortunate to know it even further back than, the mid or early 1600s. We all come from somewhere else. We're all immigrants to this place. We have the first people that have been here, of course, the Mi'kmaq, and then, but everyone else has migrated here. And what I'm trying to get off of my chest is this. When you live within a community, and it's a fairly isolated community where I grew up on Ile Madame, very safe. You can drive around, on your bicycle when you're a kid, and you know that if you get a flat tire anywhere, you can pretty much knock on anybody's door, and they'll help you out. You also know that if you get yourself into any kind of lick of trouble, that is probably going to get back to your mom pretty quick because everybody is connected with everybody else. I always say that I'm related to probably about 75% of the people in Ile Madame because my grandmother's family was so large. But I could always feel as a child, and again, just walk with me for a moment, and I know that it's late, but if I don't say this, I know I will always regret it. There was always something within me as a child that knew that something was a little bit different about perhaps our family and the customs within my family than were, say, in other Acadian families on the island. You can't verbalize or exactly know, what this means as a child. You just know, and again, I'm a very tactile creature. I was a very, sensitive kid, and also, I'd mentioned before, when you're on a breathing machine when you're a kid, you become like, a watcher of people. And you perhaps take things in a different way. But I could always feel that there's a bit of a difference there. We lived on the north side of the island, and, as much, again, I'll say, we're more alike than we are different. But you could always feel that there was something just a little bit different about the family. And as I went through life, and I've gotten to this stage, I've realized in doing some history and looking at and having a very fortunate in having relatives that did our genealogical search. Part of the history of this province, and we hear it again and again, that the history is basically written by those who are victorious. There is a piece of history in this province, and outside we have an first Acadian lieutenant governor, which is an extraordinary thing. I'm an Acadian woman, first woman in my constituency. It's an important milestone. But I can tell you again that there is a part of the history of this province that has been hidden, almost like it is a bad, dirty secret. And it has to stop, Madam Speaker. It really has to end. And unless someone, and if that needs to be me, because I just happen to be here, if it needs to be me that comes forward and says, there are some of us that are different because we come from two different cultures that are blended together. And that's an amazing thing. That should be something that should be celebrated, not something that we should be asked to hide. But I can understand at a point in history where that would not have been seen as positive. We, likely, my relatives would have been called some really unfortunate things, some of those words I've mentioned in the House. It is a dark piece of our history in this province. The expulsion of the Acadians was bad enough, where you have boatloads of people unarmed being put onto boats and, sent off to colonies, which I've spoken about in the past. But then there are other Acadians who were intermarried with the First Nations of this province, the Mi'kmaq. And somehow it has gotten to a point where if a person opens her mouth like myself to talk about that side of my family's history, which I feel is absolutely beautiful, I want to be able to celebrate it. And it actually answers so many questions that I had growing up about why my family was a little bit different. You see, I saw other families that were kind of like mine, but then there were other Acadian families on the island as well, and they didn't have the same customs as we did. I mean, my dad would be going out, and I went with him. In fact, we still have it. He would go out eel fishing. You know, this is a very traditional First Nations custom. And I couldn't quite, again, understand, and I still don't. And I guess this is, you know, the epitome of what racism is really about. And I stand here today with, you know, dressed in pink from head to toe because it, you know, racism, bullying, suppression, all of those horrible words that hold us back as people, that hold actually the history of our province, the true history of our province to actually be spoken about openly. We're told not to talk about it because, well, if I talk about it, I must want something. You know what I want, Madam Speaker? I just want to be able to say, this is who I am. This is just who I am. I think differently. Maybe it's because, I don't know, maybe it's because I have a foot in both worlds. Isn't that a glorious thing? I speak differently. My brain works a little bit differently. I appreciate when I go, and I did not grow up in a First Nations community, but when I go, and I've been very fortunate to be able to go on many occasions in this position, I see faces reflected back to me that I recognize, although I've never seen them before. I feel a kinship in a way that I don't feel a kinship with others. And I wish, Madam Speaker, that my father would have had an opportunity to come with me, because I think it would have answered a lot of questions for him as well. We need to stop suppressing others. We need to stop hiding. You know, we're constantly like trying to hide things that maybe are not convenient for us. And I'm sure it wasn't convenient for my family at one time. You imagine it was bad enough being Acadian at one time. But to be Acadian and Mi'kmaq, wow. You're a half-breed. It's a horrible word. But it needs to be said because it's part of our history in this province. See, I'm not a believer in trying to sanitize things. I know we've had statues taken down because they represent some really unfortunate moments in our history in this province. I'm a true believer that instead of trying to pull those statues down, we should be adding other information, other statues, other pieces of our history to that moment in time so that we can understand why that happened in the first place so that it doesn't happen again, Madam Speaker. I never could understand why I couldn't find our family in any kind of a manifest that went off on these ships, bringing people to all these destinations and these ports where they weren't even wanted. They were not wanted. There were, thousands of them. They had nothing. You can only imagine what happened to them when they arrived there. we talk about the Emancipation Act tonight, and I do not want to take away anything from any other cultural group in this province. But I can tell you this, it spoke to me. And I am grateful that we passed that piece of legislation this evening, because African Nova Scotian people have gone through hell on earth. And there is a part of that that I can understand. It's almost so intrinsic. It's like it's part of your cellular matter. It's part of your DNA. Can't really explain it with words. And, as an Acadian people, we are storytellers. So I know that members across the floor have said on occasion that, try to stick with policy in here. Well, maybe there's a way of being able to communicate those policy ideas or changes that need to be made in a different communication manner. My cultural background is very much about storytelling. We tell stories to be able to relate information. We are an oral culture, as are the Mi'kmaq. I cannot leave this house this evening without reiterating that our history is written, as the minister so aptly said earlier, by the lion. And the lion likes to devour its prey. And it's much more beneficial to be dividing people, even within a cultural group. Divide people, because that way we can conquer them more easily. We've got those Acadians that came from that ancestry. We've got those Acadians that are kind of mixed and they're hiding in the woods over there. We've got the British. We've got all this stuff going on, 16, 17, 1800s. It is of that time. I cannot look at that and judge from where we are today. It is of that time, and thank goodness, Madam Chair, that I live and I am a woman that have an opportunity like this, which I would never have had then, and would never have had even just only 50, 60 years ago. We have Gladys Porter, who's over there on the wall, as the first woman who's been elected in this legislature. I sat underneath her portrait for quite some time. Madam Speaker, we need to recognize within one another that as much as we are more the same, there are small differences that should be celebrated and not be hidden or not be, please don't talk about that because you want something. I don't want something from anybody. All I want is an opportunity to be able to speak my own truth. And the truth for so many families in Cape Breton, Richmond, and not just Cape Breton, Richmond, they're down in the southern part of Nova Scotia, they're, in Shetty Camp. Right. Madam Speaker, racism, lateral violence, which is exactly what occurs and is in a horrible leftover piece. I won't call it a gift, a curse that is left over from obviously colonialism, that divide and conquer mentality. We are even having, gone to the point of dividing amongst ourselves within one cultural group. It needs to stop. And I would really ask the members of this House, as much as you can only imagine what other women and men of different cultural groups must have gone through who wouldn't have been part of that privileged class at one time. We are all privileged here today to be sitting here, standing in my place. But at one time, I would not have been able to do this. We have spoken about it with regard to the timeline of who was given the opportunity to vote, to own land in this province. Our history is varied. We need to be speaking about all of it. And I do not care about what label you put on me at the end of the day, and those like me that I know are still hiding. They're hiding. They don't want to talk about it because they know what's going to happen to them. They're going to be asked to be quiet. You don't exist. Can you imagine being told that you don't exist? Can you imagine what damage that must do over the course of time to take somebody's identity away? And still to this day to tell them, you know, if you talk about that, it takes away from this group, or it takes away from that group, or you must want something. I don't want anything. I only want you to be able to listen and acknowledge that I exist. I am here, and there are many more like me who live silently with this part of our history. I don't want to be silent anymore, Madam Speaker. And I do not need another label. I have grown up in an Acadian community, proud. Je suis tellement fière de ma culture et ma langue française. But it needs to be talked about, because I'm telling you, we can talk about mental health issues, we can talk about addiction, we can talk about all manner of health issues that occur within my community, my constituency at home. But if you don't get to the root of the problem of why it's occurring, you'll never solve it. There are so many incidents, and I remember growing up, I had a next door neighbor who basically, got shot through his window. I had family friends who were killed in automobile accidents. Alcohol, drugs, depression. These are all real issues that exist in my community. And they have existed since I was a child. It would always be kind of, sort of the man thing, you go out and you drink yourself into a stupor, you get into your car and, you go off the road. Everybody knew, who it likely was. These moments in time have stayed with me, Madam Speaker, because I realize they're not normal. They're not normal. They are born from something deep within. And more so than just being a people conquered, which basically is what the Acadians were, that mentality stays with you throughout the generations. You are told, and I was told, don't talk about that, Lena. Parle pas à propos de ça, Lena. Don't speak about that. It's unspeakable, and you're going to get yourself in trouble. You're going to get yourself kicked out of here, basically. Unless you've lived this life, unless you've lived in this community, these communities, it's more than just mine, you can't possibly understand the depth of the issues that need to be resolved. And they're issues that surround mental health, addiction, violence against women, and people who are terrified to come forward to say anything.
And so it just continues on and on and on from generation to generation until someone, even though they're told to please shut up about that, I don't want to hear it. That I've got to stand up in this house, Madam Speaker, because I will regret it for the rest of my life. And if that's the only reason why I've made my way here, and I can make a positive impact in some way, is that I exist. My family exists. The families within Cape Breton, Richmond, the Acadians, the Eastern Métis, if you want to call them that. Whatever label you want to give, it does not matter to me. We exist. And I personally do not want anything from you except kindness, acknowledgement, and understanding that this issue of hiding, comme un Acadien, une Acadienne, et puis aussi hiding as someone who would have come from mixed heritage, it has a lingering effect that needs to be addressed in our community. And no one wants to talk about it. So I am. Je commence la conversation ici ce soir. And I open this up for further dialogue between the Acadians, the First Nations, those who want to label or call themselves whatever they wish, Eastern Métis, mixed. Ça ne fait pas de différence à propos de mes conversations. It doesn't make any difference to me. And other settlers who were brave enough to come across the ocean and settle here. We have to stop hiding this part of history. And we need to be able to feel safe. Seems ridiculous, really, to say that as an adult. We need to be able to feel safe to come forward and speak and not be chastised or told to shut up. Madam Speaker, je suis la fille d'Alfred et Marie Pang. I'm just a kid off Almadam. What do I know? All I know is that something has to change at home. Something has to change. And I know as well, as I'm standing here, that something very drastically needs to change within this house. The rules need to change. And I'm not talking throw the baby out with the bathwater. I'm a very huge proponent of tradition and protocol. But we need to take a look at what is inequitable in how we do things in this house. And we need to give an opportunity for those like myself who maybe see things differently. We need people who sit in this house who are different and who come from different, not just cultural backgrounds, but we need people in this house who also come from different perspectives in their thought processes, different experiences, not just professional experience, different life experiences. And we need to give voice, allow those people to give voice to who they truly are. Because if we don't, Madam Speaker, the cycle of violence, the cycle of alcoholism, the cycle of all manner of what we call at home unspeakable things are just going to continue. I thank the members of this House for permitting me this time to be able to finally, and perhaps for the last time, in this House, speak my truth. And with that, Madam Speaker, I move to close address in reply. Thank you.
The motion is to adjourn, address, and reply. Would all those in favor of the motion please indicate by saying aye? Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. The motion is carried. I recognize the Honourable Government House Leader.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I move that concludes the government's business for the day. I move that we now recess for a short period until and await the arrival of the LG.
We will take a short recess while we wait for His Honour, the Lieutenant Governor.
Governor is without.
Let His Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, be admitted.
His Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, please rise. It is the wish of His Honor, the Lieutenant Governor, that the ladies and gentlemen be seated.
Good. May it please Your Honor, the General Assembly of the province has at its present session passed certain bills to which, in the name and on behalf of the General Assembly, I respectfully request Your Honor's assent.
Bill number 1, an act respecting the management of police identity to prevent unlawful activity. Bill number 4, an act to provide for the conservation and sustainable use of biodiversity in Nova Scotia. Bill number 9, an act to amend Chapter 114 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Crown Lands Act. Bill number 23, an act to open adoption records in Nova Scotia. Bill number 28, an act to amend Chapter 250 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Land Titles Clarification Act respecting the Land Titles Initiative. Bill number 47, an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act, and Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter respecting accessibility. Bill number 50, an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act, and Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter respecting codes of conduct. Bill number 74, an act to amend Chapter 228 of the Acts of 1920, an act to incorporate the Yarmouth Golf and Country Club. Bill number 77, an act to authorize a marketing and promotions levy in the town of Digby and the municipality of the District of Digby. Bill number 85, an act to amend Chapter 418 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Securities Act. Bill number 87, an act to amend Chapter 41 of the Acts of 2011, the Pension Benefits Act. Bill number 92, an act to establish a registry for continuing care assistance. Bill number 95, an act to amend Chapter 160 of the Revised Statutes 1989, the Parenting and Support Act. Bill number 97, an act to amend Chapter 25 of the Acts of 2004, the Electricity Act. Bill number 98, an act to amend Chapter 18 of the Acts of 1998, the Municipal Government Act, and Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter respecting virtual meetings. Bill number 103, an act to amend Chapter 39 of the Acts of 2008, the Halifax Regional Municipality Charter. Bill number 105, an act respecting certain financial measures. Bill number 112, an act to recognize Emancipation Day.
In Her Majesty's name, I assent to these bills.
Your Honor, having been graciously pleased to give your assent to the bills passed during the present session, it becomes my agreeable duty on behalf of Her Majesty's dutiful and loyal subjects, her faithful Commons of Nova Scotia, to present your Honor a bill for the appropriation of supply granted in the present session for the support of the public service and to request your Honor's assent thereto.
An act to provide for defraying certain charges and expenses of the public service of the province.
In Her Majesty's name, I thank her loyal subjects. I accept their benevolence and I assent to this bill.
Please rise. The Speaker.
I would ask that the members please rise and join me in the singing of our national anthem. O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us commands. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north, strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. Please be seated. I'd like to thank the honourable member for Halifax-Chebucto for keeping us in tune there. The Honourable Premier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a few notes of gratitude to those that made this session possible, especially the first virtual session that we've had in this legislature in literally hundreds of years in our history, especially you, Mr. Speaker, our new deputy speakers for coordinating all of the days that we've had here, the pages that support us. And I understand Charlotte finished with her last exam and she won't be with us anymore, so congratulations. Our commissionaires and the HRM police, and of course Dave, our Sergeant-at-Arms, for keeping us safe while we're here. Our clerks, Karen and James, congratulations to the new clerks for supporting us. And Peter and Kyle, Ledge Operations, the Speaker's Office, Hansard, Ledge TV, Ledge Council, library staff, of course all of our caucus staffs that support us through our days in the House, and our opposition parties for continuing to hold us to account, and some great questions before us in question period. And my own MLAs, my team, for standing by us, the teammates that I've had for the last 8 years, and of course all of our families that support all of us as we do the work that we do on behalf of Nova Scotians. Mr. Speaker and members of the House of Assembly, I move that this General Assembly be adjourned to meet again at the call of the Speaker.
The motion is that the House now adjourn to meet again at the call of the Speaker. All those in favor of the motion, please indicate aye. Aye. Contrary-minded, nay. Motion is carried. We now stand adjourned.